Gear up, because this is the Fuel Your Marketing podcast, designed to accelerate sales and grow your business. Let's welcome your host, Arti Sharma.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fuel Your Marketing. I'm your host, Arti Sharma, and today I have, in this episode, it's not just about sales tactics or funnel, it's from the heart, right? It's about the human behind the revenue. My guest today is Jordan Benjamin, who's someone who I've really just met recently and have really admired his journey, and someone who blends emotional intelligence along with the science of sales. He's been a mental health advocate, and I don't want to take the thunder away from him, so I'm going to welcome him. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Jordan. Jordan, welcome to the show.
Hey, excited to be here, Arti.
Thank you so much. Why don't we, start with kick off with you letting our audience know a little bit more about you, your journey, and about what you're doing today.
Yeah, so I stumbled into sales pretty early on. Got into a few startups in marketing, technology. Those startups failed. I got laid off twice in 6 months. Had a networking connection that I knew at HubSpot, and my wife was moving to Boston at the time, so reached out to this guy, Adam Mavrikos, and he was like, yeah, we're hiring like crazy. Come join us. I was terrified to move to Boston, ended up on the channel partner team. So I started coaching agency owners on how do they grow and develop their business. At the time, HubSpot was about 600 employees. Really started to learn a lot of different skills that I'd never learned in college. I was always a little weird as a salesperson, coming from Boulder, Colorado, where I was a yoga instructor and I led meditation and all these things where people thought I was pretty weird as a salesperson, especially on the East Coast. And somehow I performed really well, hit multiple presidents clubs, founders club, $1 million earner, $1 million seller, things like that really came around. How do I build these practices that never were taught in school? Things
hold on.
fire away.
You said you did meditation, yoga, and then you did sales. That's very unheard of, right? So at what stage in your life that made you realize that you're not just going to be chasing another quota or a number, or you would, you're not that typical sales guy who's chasing that revenue goal, but not filling themselves?
That part came later for me. That part came after some therapy and really even once I decided to leave HubSpot, I'd realized that a lot of my value that I'd placed around myself as a human was because I could be at the top of the stack rank and because I could achieve quota and hit President's Club, I thought I was valuable. Now, the meditation, the yoga, those things helped me manage the stress cycle in sales and the roller coaster, I'd say, a bit more effectively. But some of the other work that I did with my own personal coaches and development and training that I kind of invested in for myself is where I started to find more purpose behind the goals that I was chasing. Because what happens for me, and I see a lot of folks, is they feel like they're running on a hamster wheel, chasing goals that somebody else has set for them without any purpose behind it, without any reason or why. And so that piece, probably like 3 years into my HubSpot career, when I first invested in a coach for myself, beyond my manager or whoever else I had around me, is when I started to define the purpose behind why I wanted to hit the goal. That was more so than just, well, hit the goal because they told you that's what the goal is and then you earn money.
I'm relating to this a whole lot. And I'm relating to this a whole lot because, sometimes we set goals that we have been told that we have to chase as a child. And it's sometimes, we're wired for those. And then as we grow or we become wiser, I would say, and then we start to kind of look inward, as you did, looks like, there's a lot more reflection that comes. And with that deep reflection comes, that you uncover your why, your purpose. And then when you marry the two, it looks like that you've done that. So congratulations on that, because it's very hard. It's a different journey altogether. I've been on that. I am on that. So I know sometimes you get deviated, but you have to go back to your practices. Was there a particular moment in your life, or was it something that you remember particularly that led you in that path? And you said, no, the 3-year-old in HubSpot, I need a personal coach. What happened? Was there something that happened? It could be just, light bulb went on, but it could be something or an event.
Definitely. As we know in sales, marketing, common understanding is that pain drives action. That is the best motivator for anybody. And so for me, it was when I had my worst performance year at HubSpot. I hit 105%, which doesn't sound bad to most people, but at the time that was that was like a B or a B plus, maybe in terms of performance.
Mhm.
And I'd also had a handful of managers change over, and I just realized like I wasn't going to have consistency there. Their
Mhm.
job is to manage and
Mhm.
maybe lead. And so when I hit this kind of roadblock and said, well, I'd hit President's Club the year before, and now I didn't, I was like, I'm missing something here. And I'd felt the business had wronged me and like territory changes and these things. And so it was like, all right, if I want to really be successful and move myself to that next level and sustain success, I've got
Mhm.
to invest in myself. I'm relatively frugal most of the time. So I was terrified to make that investment in myself. And I want to put my money in the stock market and let it grow and compound. But I realized one of the best investments I can make is actually in myself, because that compounding will work so much faster than the 7 or 8 years it may need to be in the market. So that's
Mhm.
where I went out and started to get a coach. I was also inspired by some social proof of a friend that I knew, and actually a marketing agency owner that I knew that had one as well, that opened the door for me to say, okay, I want to be better. I want to perform better. Uh, and that's really that kind of trigger moment that opened
Mhm.
my eyes to say, maybe I should invest in myself if I want to be a professional at this, just as much as professional athletes have a team of coaches around them. If I want to build my life as a professional, I should probably build a team around myself too.
100%. I'm a big believer in coaching, and I was always hesitant. But once I did it, I've not looked back. And I think my Demi Moore, I'm going to give her a shout out. Demi Moore, what am I saying? Demi was was my first coach, and I'm going to send her the segment because she changed my life. And how do I see coaching per se? I never thought coaching was for me. I thought I don't need coaching, but once I did, the accountability that it came with, the clarity that it brought, and what coaches do is, for those of us who are in that career juncture where we are re-evaluating the listeners, if you are, I think what coaching does is it just helps you find answers that you already have inside of you. It's just that somebody comes in to just uncover those answers for you. So definitely
Totally.
can invest. I would highly recommend.
I want to share like a funny story that just happened to
Yeah.
me recently that's very basic, but
Mhm.
I think this is something that many folks can resonate or relate to. Is I went to my barber the other week
Yeah.
and was like, I don't know, my hair lays down like kind of flat. What can I do to give it a little bit more volume or body? What can you do to like, spice it up? And I always kind of like parted it over to one side. And he was like, well, if you go against, and if you like just part it against the way that it naturally lays down, it'll stand up more. And I never thought of that. And to me, that's one of these other areas of coaching where it's like somebody from the outside just may look at things a little differently or have a different perspective than you, because you have your blinders on in the way that you've built your own personal operating system in the world. And you don't know that some of these other possibilities may exist. And so even something as goofy as like, oh yeah, what if you just like went the other way with your hair, to me was one of these coaching moments where somebody has expertise in a different area that, yeah, maybe my wife would have told me that, or many other people. But that to me is also this beauty of coaching, where this just opens the door for someone with a little bit of outside perspective to look at your situation and where you want to go and say, well, have you thought about it this way? And all of
Yeah.
a sudden it's like, nope, never, but that makes complete sense.
200%. And you said something very beautiful. Two things that got my attention, and I want to complete those thoughts. You said pain creates action. That's when you thought that, so there was pain that led to action. But I will add to it, action cures fear. Also, so there's a little bit of that, and I always say this, and my listeners have heard me say this. This is my mantra. Every time that I'm not taking action, I know that there's some fear or some pain that I'm not trying to address. So I always take action, and then that inspires me to move forward with it. So that's one. And thank you so much for being so vulnerable to share that, because there's always pain. Then there's lack of action that leads us to be in that situation. And then you said we have a team. Like if you're to go buy a house, you will have a real estate agent, your mortgage agent, your financial advisor, everybody. You have a team, right? If you're a real estate investor, you have a team. Why would you not have a team for yourself, for your personal growth, your professional growth? And you need that team around you. And every time I've taken big moves, I've actually consolidated a team. And I
Mm.
think another thing that you said is you got to stay in your lane. You got to work in your, what makes you really good at what you do. So you obviously, in order for you to be in your desired zone, you have to fill those other gaps that somebody else would bring in. But I'm going to shift a little bit. And, so what did you have to unlearn in order for you to come out from the target chasing, the quota chasing salesperson to lead with heart again? Besides, was there a specific area that you uncovered that you had to unlearn as a sales professional?
Yeah, it gets into the skill of curiosity.
Mhm.
I've always been very curious to learn new things, but I got bored in sales for a while. I
Mhm.
talked to so many business owners and leaders that I was like, man, these people are just stupid. Like, how do they not see this way forward? How do they not better, more effective? And so I got bored on every conversation. I got bored on my own development, learning, and growth. One of the best skills, and even if you look at the World Economic Forum's report on what skill is going to be very critical in 2030, one of the top skills to perform in work is curiosity, is the ability to adapt and learn. And so for me, once I got this understanding of I don't have all the answers, learning is a continuous gain. I
Hmm.
thought if I went to school, got good enough grades, went to university, did, 3 point something there at least, it was like, okay, I'm ready for a good life. The biggest thing I had to unlearn was the fact that school really didn't teach me much anything I needed to live a great life and really to get to anything beyond mediocre. And so, really getting back to this concept of curiosity, that learning is something that really never goes away in life, and
Hmm.
seeing every conversation with a prospect or a partner or business owner as, where can I learn something here? Whether it's about myself, how do I show up better and more effectively? Or whether, especially when I was in the sales seat, was, wow, these people have the courage to build and lead a business.
Hmm.
There's something I can learn from every single one of them, because it takes that ability to take action through fear.
Hmm.
That is a skill that we all need. So for me, the big unlearning was this: I haven't learned anything yet that actually is going to get me to a wonderful or outstanding life. And I need to keep being curious and build that muscle, because everyone says, like, oh, genuine curiosity. Well, to me, you can build almost any skill, and genuine curiosity comes from changing the story in your head and building that muscle to say, okay, how do I keep learning all the time?
And you do it with intention if you don't have that as a natural mode of operation. I was Sandler trained long ago, and it was always be curious, ABCs of that. So I forgot that along the way. But then I want to leave our listeners with one thing. Recently, we met with a team, we were talking about curiosity, and we were talking about where are we feeling stagnant? And maybe we stopped asking the questions because we're so good at what we do. We're not
Mm-hmm.
keeping an eye on what's coming through the gates and whatnot. So I left the team with one of my best practices, and happy to share here. Long time ago, because I wasn't asking the questions on sales calls, that I should be asking. And then it also, maybe that was my mode of operation for other things that I was doing in life. My sales coach said, you need a post-it note on your desktop. It says, tell me more. And so that became it became very natural to me to ask questions, but I had to be intentional about it for the first 3, 4 months, to say every time I got off the sales call, I said, how many times did I say, tell me more? How many times did I ask question? How inquisitive I was. So I think that's really great. I want to shift gears, Jordan, if that's okay, a little bit, because, when somebody is in the sales role, go-to-market Lord, CRO role. And also as a leader, you've got teams, you've got numbers, you've got board, you've got everybody coming at you. You have to protect some of your energy, right? And what's the role of rituals and boundaries, do you think, that plays in being a leader that you want to be? Let's say if you are a CRO today, what kind of rituals would you have? What kind of best practices would you follow to protect your energy while you still, with heart, reach your numbers?
This is a really challenging thing for most people in today's environment. And so I was talking to a leader today that said, I'm feeling pulled in every direction. I feel overwhelmed and so busy. I don't know where to focus. And so the exercise that we went through is like, great, what are the top three most important areas in your life?
Mm-hmm.
And she came back with, first and foremost, my kids. Secondarily, my other relationships with family, my partner, and then my business and my team behind that. And most people don't stop to even define those values. Again, I love these insights from companies to say, well, what do companies do to help build predictable, sustainable businesses, and how can we apply that to our lives? And so
Mm-hmm.
companies have missions, visions, and values. They have these things clearly defined, but most people don't have this defined in their lives. And so if we can say, okay, my kids, my relationships, and my business are my top three priorities. Well, once we have those values defined, it makes it easier to say, well, where do I need to set boundaries? What do I need to prioritize in my life? And so that's one of those initial pieces. And then the other thing that I've seen across so many leaders that is really this lead domino in sustainable performance is taking care of your health, is finding ways to either nutrition, exercise. I'm a massive proponent of, which is easy to say, but even if it's just getting outside and like walking your dog or with a partner or with your kids or taking a walking meeting once or twice a week with somebody that's a one-on-one that doesn't have, as much as I love the face-to-face over Zoom, if you have somebody that you've worked with for a long time, you know what they look like, you know what their background's going to be. And it may be something that's really important or beneficial for both of you, as especially as a leader, to show, hey, are you open if we like take this meeting while I'm walking outside? Because not only are there usually less notification distractions dinging and going off everywhere, but it also gives you that chance to recharge. And so the rituals that I talk to folks about is like, how do you build a menu of things that help you recharge before your battery gets to zero? That may be, great, 1 minute, I just go pet my dog. I listen to a funny clip. And ideally, it's not like scrolling on social media or checking your email. 5 minutes. Okay, I'm going to listen to my favorite song. I'm going to breathe for a couple of minutes. Great. 20 minutes. What do you do? Oh, I go for a longer walk outside and I listen to a podcast or I sit and read a book. And so these are the things that you want to make really easy for you to have the habit or rituals around that say, okay, great. Yeah, every day, here's my morning startup routine or some of these other areas. And I could share more about like my great day framework and some of those pieces. But that's where I find that having not only the boundaries, but the easy little tweaks within the day that create that work-life harmony and integration, opposed to trying to say, well, it's, 8 to 5, 8 to 6, I'm like locked in on the computer and then it all shuts down. It's just not how our world works in today's day and age. And so finding that integration throughout your day is really what creates that foundation for you as a leader, and also mirrors that for your team to see how they can show up as well.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, agency life is a little hustle or back to back. We have to do a better job as an organization to kind of, create that margin. But having said that, I think I call this mini rewards that you have to give yourself throughout the day. And while you have your big rocks and big tasks and big goals, but you have to kind of, everything that you have to give yourself a reward. And I think your mindset needs to shift because you cannot be productive working two and a half hours straight, unless it's a deep work, but then give yourself a reward. Pet your dog.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
We are fur baby company. We have a lot of cats and dogs jump on the Zoom calls and Teams calls. So that's great.
I love that. You did say one thing that I'll add in there, that really neuroscience shows that our brain can focus in a sustained amount of time for about 90 minutes.
That is correct.
And so I love this concept of like the Pomodoro technique.
Oh, I love Pomodoro. I was going to bring it up.
I love it. And so it's like, how do you cut off distractions, have intention to focus on one thing, do a 25-minute sprint, 5-minute breaks, do 3 of those in a row and then take a longer break. And then you also talked about rewards. Something that I do with everybody that I work with is what can you celebrate at the end of every single day? Small wins. Yeah, it's really shown to program the brain. This is maybe too deep for what folks want to get into, but it's like our brain is built and wired for fear and scarcity. That's how we're alive as humans. Thousands, millions, whatever years later you want to call it, that's how we're alive. And yet that does not serve us very much in today's day and age. That's why there's burnout, stress, overwhelm. And so finding those little wins and victories or practicing gratitude throughout the day are these things that really open the door and train your brain to find more good in the world.
Yeah, and I think you said our brain's wired to see the negatives and the fear, the scarcity. And you talked a little bit more about the intertwining, one harmonious life, work is part of your life, right? Which brings me to this disconnect, from a sales and marketing standpoint. I'm going to round us back to that topic. What do you think sales and marketing teams really struggle in terms of operating as one team, even with the tools and the dashboards and all the, HubSpot dashboards available for everybody to be in. Let's give HubSpot a shout out here.
Yeah.
But in your experience, what is it?
It's the bifurcation of the two teams, calling them two different things. I like this move towards GTM lately, or revenue teams. I think that moves us in a better direction. But fundamentally, our brains, again, process language in very certain ways. So we see sales as one team over here, marketing as another one over here. The challenge is they both have the exact same goals of drive growth for the business, but they see them as at odds, or it's really easy, again, for us to point the finger at somebody else, place blame, see this fear or scarcity. And so to me, I loved the concept that Dan Tyre introduced at HubSpot early on of schmarketing, where he's like, it's not sales and marketing. It's how do these two teams really connect and work together? And how do we get to our core value and core purpose as an organization of saying, how do we help more customers? How do we help drive growth across the board? And so to me, that's where it starts. And not being able to come and connect with each other to realize that we are all working together towards the same objective. Yes, we have different micro steps along the way, but if we can all come together to say, yes, we are all working in the same direction here. Dharmesh at an inbound conference many years ago talked about vector alignment that he learned from Elon Musk that said, how do you get everybody working in the same direction together, opposed to working off in different areas? And so to me, having a culture of feedback is really critical between sales and marketing, where they can both share feedback in a way that is not felt as negative criticism, but as a way to level up and grow, where sales can say, yeah, here's some of these leads that we're getting, that here's the gap that we're seeing, opposed to just saying these leads suck, they're not good enough. We can actually get to, oh, here's the gap we're seeing in these leads. And here's how we can provide feedback from the quality customers that we're closing, help marketing find more of them. And so finding that flywheel and that harmonious cycle between them is really what helps drive that vector alignment to move everybody in the same direction towards that same goal.
I agree. The go-to-market is not just about siloed departments, right? It's about alignment and bringing everybody together. And there's a vector alignment is one term, but I've also seen people talk about, what does your A team look like? Your first team approach, and the first team approach is all about, bringing those different units and different business units together for one North Star metric, which is where everybody's singing from the same hymn book. So I think there's a lot of work that still needs to be done in organizations in order for them to do that. But I think it starts at the top also, right? If Dharmesh had not set the tone, everybody would not have been aligned. And those little mini projects that stem from there and looking at those numbers collectively and holding each other accountable for those numbers is very important. And you really painted the picture well from a standpoint of sales and marketing. That feedback loop has to be completed. Now, I find that, one feedback loop is important. OKRs, your KPIs have to be aligned. But do you know any metrics that can bring teams together as well? What kind of KPIs that can cause either misalignment or better alignment? What would those be in your experience?
Where friction always comes from is the MQLs and SQLs and all these areas, which they move in the right direction, but it does open the door for interpretation. And so getting really clear and understanding that this is an evolving conversation about, well, what does a marketing qualified lead mean? What does a sales qualified lead mean is really where the opportunity lies. It's tough because you've got your board, you've got the leadership team all setting these things to say, great, here's our goals for the year, here's what we need to do. But understanding that this is something that's going to move and flow, because a company is this growing organism. And if we think we're just going to be static and this is all that we're doing, it really struggles. And so I'm a big fan of having those indicators, but understanding the definition and the context behind each of them, and what does that actually mean to each team, and how does that evolve as we learn, as we grow, as we scale, is again where that culture of feedback is that foundational piece that needs to be there. So you're comfortable going back to your CMO and saying, you know what, we're not seeing the quality of leads because of this reason. What can we do together? How can we help you from the sales side to give you feedback on what great looks like for us? And marketing also gets the ability to give feedback to say, your job is sales, so we can really restrict the pipeline, but you're probably going to miss some opportunities there. So having this comfort and level of where is that line or where is that barometer for people to say, this is good enough. And how do we work to, again, have this mutual goal of constant improvement and not just staying settled, I think is one of those foundational elements that helps those teams work together, opposed to at odds with each other or the constant finger pointing that most of us are used to that have been in this world for a while.
100%. My friends at GTM Partners, they always say, Brian and Sangram, they always talk about clarity, alignment, and trust, right? It's about that. And I think that's what you've outlined here. But I also think that, when things are working, we should know what is working so that we can replicate it. When things are not working, we should also have that open communication, transparent communication. We talked a lot about, different things and different metrics, but in terms of systems, strategy, and sales, how has the role of modern seller also changed today? Because we have so much technology available to us, and buyers are more educated as well, and sometimes skeptical, right? So do you believe that we both have come from inbound? We're HubSpot partners. You've got tenured experience at HubSpot. We talk about inbound. Where's the role of outbound today? And how has inbound evolved? Those two questions. I'm dwelling upon those. Would love to get
great questions. And for me, I didn't really realize this until I was on a podcast 6-7 years ago now. But somebody asked me about like my sales journey. And I was into yoga, as we already covered. I got rejected for my first sales job as a BDR. And so I went and worked at Lululemon, selling yoga clothing. Nice Canadian company for you there. And so
appreciate that.
And so we had this really interesting thing. When I started, I was a retail salesperson in my eyes. My job title was educator. And so what set the foundation for me as I think about sales today is, how do I learn the ins and outs of not only my product, but the person that I'm selling to? What are their key objectives? What really matters to them? What are the goals or challenges that they run into? And how do I also understand the entire market and the competition? Because the best sellers today, well, fundamentally, nobody wants to be sold to. I'm in sales. I love sales. I never want to be sold to, especially this younger generation. And so the best sellers today, whether it's with outbound, inbound, and this is where it comes from inbound, is it's all about education. It's all about how do we educate people as effectively as possible and understand their persona. So what I talk about is my pillars for success, or the kind of success pyramid, is the foundation of your revenue generating activities as a seller, as a leader, are how do you constantly focus on learning and development, whether it's about the industry, whether it's about the product, the persona, your process, because that's what helps you understand when you talk to this new person or when you look at this profile that you're about to send a cold message to, how do you actually add value for that person? How do you hook their attention with something that says, yeah, that's exactly one of the things that I'm struggling with today, but that's exactly one of the objectives that my board has tasked me with. And if you can hit that and essentially explain their problem to them better than they may be even able to explain it themselves, that's where you start to build trust. That's where you start to capture attention and start the conversation. So to me, I go back to those roots of how do you be an educator? Because the best sellers in today's day and age, the best leaders are the ones that help people move forward in a new way that maybe they've never thought of before. And it leads and starts with education.
Yeah, and I think, the concept of giver's gain, you're always giving, and adding value, you'll always gain as well. Maybe not now, but in the future, somebody will remember you, if they even don't do business with you, as long as you've added value. I think that's huge. Great points. Now, people are people. We always want to work with people. We always want to work with technology, systems, and statistics. So if you were to choose between better systems, better training, or better culture, which actually moves the needle in revenue, on revenue teams, especially?
I'm a big believer in mindset and how that drives every action that we do. And so to me, better culture solves every one of those boxes. If you have a culture of feedback, if you have a culture of constant growth and curiosity, well, you're going to see where are the opportunities to create better systems. You're going to be open to learning and development. So to me, I go back to better culture as the foundation of everything, because that's one of the things that I saw at HubSpot from other companies I'd been at that this culture is what had people focused on high performance, focused on solving for the customer,
Hmm.
focused on being remarkable. And so
Hmm.
that culture to me is what will inherently be that lead domino to better systems, better training, better results and success.
And you do talk about mental models in selling, and so how do you think marketing leaders need to rewire their thinking to truly support that culture? Because I am also a big believer that culture will solve all problems, but it's really hard to build. It doesn't get built at the top, alone. That's my opinion. It does definitely
Yep.
starts from there. So what kind of mental models in selling have you used? Would you recommend leaders of today?
The leadership model that I work with everyone on, I believe sales is leadership, leadership is sales. And how do you become your best version of a leader is really this 4-part framework. And first
Mhm.
and foremost, it starts with how do you know yourself?
Mhm.
Build that self-awareness and understanding of who you are. What are those, as you mentioned at the start, maybe the models that you have from growing up as a child that influence how you see, how you perceive the world.
Mhm.
And once you know yourself, then you can move to stage 2 where you can start to control yourself and say, is that aligned with who I want to be and where I want to go? Is
Mhm.
that the operating system that I want to be running on that's going to take me to the future that I want to create for myself, for my family, for my company?
Mhm.
Because once you know yourself and can control yourself, now you can start to understand others. And that's stage 3 is understanding others, because once you can understand others, now you can actually show up and do something for others, which is the 4th stage. And so as we start thinking about that, purpose and helping solve for other people is one of the best energizers of the 4
Mhm.
types of energy that we have. And
Mhm.
it starts with ourselves, though. It starts with you got to figure out how to put your oxygen mask on first. What are those things you need? What are the boundaries you need to perform? And from there, we can actually start saying, great, how do I show up for this other team better and more effectively? What are the mental models that I have running? What is that operating system that I have in my head that is holding me back from showing up at my best or being willing to take feedback or getting defensive when the sales leader or the CEO says, hey, you're missing these metrics? And I
Mhm.
just want to say, well, it's because the sales team stinks, opposed to saying, how do I take 100% responsibility, or from Jocko Willink's book, extreme ownership, is
Yep.
really where that foundation is set. And it starts with those 4 keys to the leadership framework that really helps drive change in ourselves and therefore in everything else and everyone else we interact with.
So funny that you said that about extreme ownership, because we had one of our core values is excellence. And that last yearly strategic planning session, our team said, we need to change this one to extreme ownership. So we swapped
Mm,
that out. Excellence is in our DNA, so we have to do extreme ownership, and that's what we did. So thank you. I have so much to ask
right.
you, but I'm running out of which idea should I capture or whatnot. But I'll add one thing from a mindset modeling. You really touched upon our own limiting beliefs, but we also have to do the reverse feedback. Also, sometimes it's not the sales rep; it sometimes could be us as leaders as well. So we have to again reflect inward what you said. There's so much to catch up with you, Jordan, but I do have one last question before we wrap this up. If your younger self could see what you've become today, and what do you think they'd say?
They would be super proud. I have gone well beyond what I had expected initially within my life. The impact that I've already been able to make, all these other things, is really impressive. But if I were to give that younger self feedback,
Yeah, what
or
would you
if
say
I were to
back to
give them a piece of advice, I would go back to one of the things that you mentioned before around this concept of taking action. I spent a lot of time and hundreds of thousands of dollars learning. But action is what actually drives the best learning and best insights and best feedback. And so for me, that's the area that if I could do it over again or 10 years earlier, would be I wouldn't change anything in the world right now, but I do think I could have made a even bigger impact if I would have applied what I learned earlier on. And so that's the thing that I think a lot of people get stuck in with this mental, I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm curious. But MIT talks about their learning philosophy as mind and hand. It's great to put this stuff in your brain. It's really helpful. But where our best learning happens is when you actually apply it. And so that's what I would go back and tell myself to think about a little bit more.
What a great advice. I'm a big believer of action cures fear, but I also have learned from one of my mentors that, initiation gets inspiration. Sometimes we're procrastinating. That's where reflection comes in because we're learning, and not being curious because we have fear back of our mind sometimes. So when you are caught yourself in that mode, ask yourself again, am I not taking action because there's still some fear that I have to, or limiting belief that I have to really solve and resolve with myself to take action. But definitely action does put you forward. You'll be better than, where you are today. So keep taking action. And Jordan, thank you for this. But is there a question I haven't asked that you would want to add?
I'll add this thought around failure, which comes back to action. For me, I believe, again, school programs us when we're younger. We're afraid to fail. School tells you that failure is a bad thing. And so coming back to Carol Dweck's growth mindset, but fundamentally, this connects to that action piece where so many people are afraid of failure or afraid of imposter syndrome. And these are things that are great because it shows you're growing. And failure gives you the opportunity to take that next step forward or say, how would I do this differently moving forward? And so don't be afraid to fail. If as young children we were afraid to fail, nobody would walk because you had to fall time and time again, be very unsteady. If you were worried about imposter syndrome as a child, you would never walk as an adult. And so for me, that concept of being comfortable with failure, embracing failure, as long as you learn from it, it's never a failure, and keep picking yourself back up is one of those pieces for me that I think I've seen a lot of folks struggle with and hold themselves back in leadership, in life, that opens the door for a really rich life beyond just money as well.
Yeah, and those of you who are listening, such a great advice here. Those of you who are listening and caring for young adults or young children, I think that's such a great advice. It all starts at home as well. How do you shape them? So I'm going to definitely take that. And I'll leave you with one thought. Before we wrap up, my father once said to me, and we were talking about, I do so much. And he said, you know what, you're not doing them a favor. You're actually doing it because that makes you happy and makes you look good. So when you do something for somebody, it's just because you have some other, it's making you feel good. So give yourself that credit and say, I'm doing it for my own selfish reason, not for, doing somebody a favor. So thank you very much, Jordan, again for this. I love how real you have been about success, failure, and it's an inside out job. 100%. And for our listeners, if you, I'm sure you took a whole lot away from this episode and this segment. So go follow Jordan on LinkedIn, tune into his podcast, Peak Performance Selling, and reflect on the energy you're bringing into your work as well. So thank you once again. And this was Fuel Your Marketing. Until next time, keep aligning your mission with your momentum, and we'll see you at the next episode. Thank you again, Jordan.
Thank you for listening to the Fuel Your Marketing podcast. For more episodes, visit www.fuelyourmarketing.ca.